Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to Zoobox Goes to the Library. I'm your host, Shaun, and sitting shotgun with me on this episode is Big Paul. What's going on, Big Paul?
Hey, how you doing?
This episode, I guess, not this week. We don't do these every week. That would be crazy. We're going to be looking at Chuck Palahniuk's latest book, or at least I think it's his latest book, his latest fiction book. He did do like a nonfiction book about writing, about the craft of writing, which sounds actually interesting. I might check it out. We're going to be checking out his latest from 2020, The Invention of Sound.
Hi, my name is Chuck Palahniuk, and I am the author of The Invention of Sound. The Invention of Sound, on the surface, is more or less The Lovely Bones meets Silence of the Lambs. It is a search for a lost child, a questing father, an evil villain, and all the things that bring them together. But deep down, it's really about my obsession with the commodification of a personal experience. One side of the coin that we've explored in stories like Fight Club is that so much of our lives are defined by our consumption of things. But the other side is just how much of our lives are commodified so that they can be sold to other people, so that they can consume our lives. You know, our data, our stories, our images, all these personal things about us. And then we go out and we buy vibrators so we feel something. The Invention of Sound is about the commodification of the most intimate thing, and that is death.
Hachette.
A little short synopsis here from Goodreads is: a father's decades-long search for his missing daughter, a young woman about to engineer the perfect scream, the most dangerous secret Hollywood has ever kept. Do you want me to read the rest of it? There's like a 3-paragraph synopsis here.
Nah.
Nah.
That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. We're here to pontificate and talk everything about the invention of sound. Good old Chuck, man.
Good old Chuck Palahniuk. So what we're going to do up front, we're going to give our broad general thoughts without any spoilers. And then, so that'll probably go for, 5 or 10 minutes. And then we're going to get into some spoiler territory for those who have already read the book and would like to hear a discussion of that. So just make sure, if you haven't read it and if you're intrigued by the general broad thoughts, I think this is the kind of book, the less you know about it, the better going in. Mm-hmm. So, listen to the broad thoughts and then come back and finish the episode once you've read the novel. So this is our second time we've actually talked about a Chuck Palahniuk book on the channel. Paul and I have we reviewed the film Fight Club, but I connected with it so much more. Like, it meant so much more to me. And actually, like, I felt the resonance of it. Like, I just felt something deeper about it, and I felt like I understood it in a way that was more primal, more guttural, in a way that, as a kid, I reacted to it primally, but intellectually now I understand it primally. I understand what motivates that. Why do I want to be like that?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the movie makes a great case for it. I think it makes a great case for the maintenance of that and the importance of that. And so now I'm going to dedicate my life to raising my son as a UFC fighter. And when we went to review the film, we actually reread the book because neither of us had read it, I think, since we were teenagers.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I had, this was my pick technically, right? Because I had this in my Audible queue. Paul and I were talking about stuff, so Paul was like, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll do that." He read that little log line. He was very intrigued. He's like, "Oh, what's this? Oh my!"
Mm-hmm.
And then we're off to the races. Yeah.
No, absolutely, man, absolutely. General impressions, man. I've been dying to ask you this all week.
Yeah, we've been waiting. We've talked a few times this week, and we were like, can't really talk about it yet. Oh, so what do you want me to go first?
Oh, I fucking asked you first, so you go first.
Fair enough. So, I listened to the book twice. I want to stipulate that we did listen to this on Audible. And I like to put that caveat there because I do think it's a different experience between listening and actually physically reading a book. and you're going to get different experiences out of it. Honestly, first thing I would say, I wish I had read the book, because the way it's structured and the way that the story flows, it makes it a little tough to keep track of what's going on the way that it's read and stuff, because it basically has two main characters that it flips back and forth between their perspectives, and it doesn't alert you to that most of the time. So you'll be listening to it thinking you're listening to one person's story, and you're like, oh shit, no, I've been listening to the other person's story for like 5 minutes, and I just realized it because they made a specific reference to something that only that characters would do.
Right.
So that was a little tough. I'll have to say.
It's like I wish I bought the physical copy of the book instead of the Audible in this particular case, because you run into that so many times, right?
Yeah.
Like Space Odyssey 2001, that was a pleasant Audible experience, right? But
Yeah.
but this book, like like I wish I would have I sat down and read it for the first time.
Yeah.
I definitely read it too, because like the I forgot to write it down, but the actor who narrated the Audible for Invention of Sound did it. I thought he did a good job. It was
Yeah, so
easy
did
to
I.
listen to, and then
Yeah.
he did a good pacing too. So if you wanted to listen to it at a faster speed, you could follow along with it. It wasn't like too choppy,
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty pleasant. So
Yeah, I
but
mean,
yeah,
I think the second time through was definitely needed to really properly talk about the book. Listening to it on Audible, because it's so easy to just miss stuff. It goes by. It's a very tight book. It's like 223 pages, I think, and it goes by really fast. It's a very quick listen, a very quick read. And it goes breakneck, and it's a very minimalist. There is no fat really. It's all, and it's not a lot of there's not a lot of characters. There's not a lot of talking. It's a lot of descriptive stuff. It's a lot of talking about people, about their experiences, but there's not a lot of firsthand material, I suppose.
No.
And that could be that can make it feel a little abstract, a little obtuse, I think, to some people. But that's really, if you're more familiar with Chuck Palahniuk's writing, you'll be fine. But if you're new to Chuck Palahniuk, I think like this would be a tough one to start with. I would not recommend this as your first Chuck Palahniuk book, honestly.
That's what I was like curious to ask you all this week, because I've only read Fight Club, and now I've read Invention of Sound.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to without getting too much of it, I got a personal goal to do more recreational reading. So like some of his other work is definitely on my radar. It's like queued up. Although now after this experience, I don't think I'll do another Chuck Palahniuk book on Audible. I'll probably like get a physical copy of the next one.
Yeah.
But like definitely check it out. But I've known this like since the late 90s, since became Fight Club fans. You've been like keeping tabs on Palahniuk.
Yeah.
For the last 20 so years. And I
Yeah,
know
I
you've
know.
read,
Jesus Christ.
about like, 4 or 5, at least 4.
More than that. I've read probably like, I read most of his earlier stuff, and then I kind of lost track of him for years. And then I've read a couple sprinkled in there, and then I've read his most recent few.
Okay.
That's kind of my trajectory with Chuck Palahniuk. And and it's something that's very attractive, I think, when you're young, because of how provocative his stories are. How provocative the writing is. Like, it's dealing with concepts and types of characters that you just don't run across in a lot of contemporary fiction. It's very like extreme, and he does that with purpose. He does that on purpose. Like, he wants to provoke. Like, that's what he does. That's what Chuck Palahniuk does. That's why there's lots of like little quippy, gross things that he talks about. A lot of a lot of weird tangents and non sequiturs. A lot of description of being a Generation X person. I would say, if I had a criticism for Chuck Palahniuk, is that he is terminally Gen X. Like, so much of like his life experiences feels very informed by a person that like grew up in the 80s and 90s, like came of age in that time. Just with like self-help stuff and prescription medications and stuff like that. Those are themes that have just been big in Chuck Palahniuk's works, like across the board. He always has elements like that.
Mm-hmm.
And this book is no different in that respect. Like, it touches on those things. But he's evolved a lot as a writer, and now he's kind of dealing with, I think he's trying to kind of understand and grapple with current culture, specifically current online culture, and how that intersects with art and what that means.
Right.
And he's because this and an Adjustment Day, which is I think it came out in like 2016. They feel very much like a pair. They feel very much like a not a two-parter, but thematically there's a lot of crossover. If you're an online person, if you like are following the conversations of what's going online with like kind of weird subcultures, like even like things like the alt-right or 4chan and QAnon, like there are kind of versions of all that kind of stuff. People's like obsession with Hollywood pedophiles and secret societies and all those kinds of things. He's touching on all that stuff in Invention of Sound and in Adjustment Day specifically. And I find that kind of stuff fascinating. It's fascinating because I am aware of all the things that he's kind of referencing without directly referencing it.
Right.
I mean, the main character, one of the main characters in this novel is Gates Foster, and whose daughter went missing when she was a little girl. And he spent the past 17 years spiraling into madness, becoming the most online motherfucker ever,
Yeah.
searching the dark web,
Yep.
looking for his daughter, because I'm not getting into spoilers yet, but he thinks that his daughter was kidnapped by sex traffickers, basically by pedophile sex traffickers, and he goes on kind of this really long journey, which we'll talk about in the spoiler section.
Right.
But that stuff is very indicative of, I think, of people that get really sucked into things like QAnon
Right.
and conspiracy theories and stuff, and like it's kind of funneled through that character. Like, what can it do to a person?
Right.
Can you be brainwashed? Can you be manipulated and controlled? Like that kind of stuff. That's kind of what it's touching on.
Right, let me walk you back to earlier when you're just talking about him being provocative and and trying to talk about like shock value and stuff. So, because one of the questions I had, because you have read a lot of his work and I've only read Fight Club and now Invention of Sound, is that both similarities, and I'm only comparing the two because there's only two of Chuck's works that I've read at this point, or listen, you know what I mean. But he seems to be very interested in broken people doing broken people things, right? And then just kind of like tearing that in there, and in both cases, in Fight Club and in this, where you get broken people who, when you reflect on it, don't have a lot to really appreciate or value, or like why do you care? But he has like a really profound way of making you root for them, so to speak. You like
Sure.
understanding like where they come from, even if they're like terrible, like like a Marla Singer, right?
Yeah.
Like you still feel for Marla Singer, even after like all the incendiary shit that like she spouts out in the novel, and the film. Like you still feel like for her, right? And same thing like Foster Gates, like he's not like you feel sorry for this guy. He's driven by that, but most of the novel, he's painted out as kind of like a maniac asshole a bit,
Yes, well, because he's been driven mad by like his pursuit, right? Like, and this is something I think is true in most Chuck Palahniuk novels, is that he's able to feed you little pieces of their backstory and history that make them all tragic figures, and they're things that you identify with on a very human, empathetic level. Like, Marla Singer's a great example. Like Marla Singer you could look at Marla Singer and think she's kind of this irredeemable harpy, right? But we know enough about Marla Singer. There's enough context clues that Marla Singer is a very tragic person. It's very lost, looking for something. She finds like this strange dude, Jack, gives her a sense of life, gives her a sense of purpose. Then only to realize she's back in the cycle of abuse that her entire life has been with another person, right? And just in a more extreme way. And I think that's the same thing for the characters in this book. There's lots of things that are identifiable as just a human being that you can just have basic empathy for. And he lays all that stuff before he tells you who they really are. Oftentimes, right? Before there's a reveal or a twist, he kind of lays it out for you. You're like, oh, wow, this is provocative. This is kind of strange. They're acting kind of weird. Because most of his books, Invention of Sound no different, you're kind of just thrown into it.
Yeah.
Like you're thrown right into the story. Like there is no opening chapter where it's like, Gates Foster woke up and it was 7:00 in the morning and he thought back about like what he was doing with his life leading up to this moment. There's none of that. He's a maniac on a fucking airplane.
And not only does he get so dark, he's so descriptive, and he's got such in like the most like fucked up scenarios that you can think of, right? And like in
Hmm.
the world that he paints for you, right? He can still paint a hilarious picture in your head. You can still laugh at the absurdity of like
Oh, there's
what he
yes.
just painted for you, right?
It,
So it's just it's just so talented in being able to like string you along with this roller coaster of emotions. Like it's definitely dark. You're going through
yeah,
your roller coaster is in a haunted house. There's no doubt about that. Like that's true. But you are going to go up and down, and you're going to be really scared. You're going to be really mortified, and then you're going to laugh. And I just think that's a really speaks to his talent in just painting these
yeah,
universes for us too.
because he's a guy that he's an observer of the
Hmm.
absurd, of the things that we all do that are absurd, and the little weird pockets of stories in everybody's life. And there's also a lot of like it's gallows humor. It's
Yeah.
commiseration writing in a weird way. Like Chuck Palahniuk kind of constructs and writes almost like a journalist
Yeah.
in the way
Well,
that he approaches things, because he like some of the most horrific stuff even in this book, some of that is culled from real stories.
mm-hmm.
Like that's what he does. He's like I like to go to parties, I like to go to bars, I like to go to restaurants, I like to go to airports, and I just listen to people talk.
Yeah. And but it definitely is working out for him because he brings in real guttural reactions and like
Yeah,
real relatable stories, right?
yeah.
So
Okay, so what is your brief? How did you like this book, Paul?
yeah,
Did
yeah.
you?
In terms of like a um you know novels I've like listened to recently and like things like that, it's been it was a
Yeah,
really positive experience. I do have the same sentiment you have, is that I wish I read it instead of listening to it.
yeah.
I had to listen to it twice to get the full impact of it. Um, if I'm being like completely honest, I went through because well, a lot of my commute to work and stuff. That's when I was listening to it. And sometimes you're not focused. You got to focus on the
Of
road.
course, yeah.
Yeah. But but anyways, I was just listening to it, and then like first listen, I was just like,
What is going on?
after I first finished it, I was like, wait a minute, what? And then I listened to it the second time, and making sure I had I was in a space where I can more like
Talk about it.
focus on it, right?
Yeah,
And uh and then there's like so many sections I missed. I was just, oh my, how did I just glaze over that one? Or like
yeah. I know.
somebody must have cut me off over the road when he was talking about that. Holy shit! And then like it was, like the second time I listened, I was just like, wow, it was just crazy. And then I finished it. I think like maybe a week, a little more, longer than a week before you finished it. So
Hmm.
I had more time to stew on it. Okay, and then the more I stewed on it, like the more I really enjoyed it. And I did some fan art with it, in preparation for this too, and like
Yeah,
I just really I just kind of like really got into it. The absurdity of it, the horror aspects of it, because that's one thing too. Like I definitely would say it's like a thriller horror
yeah. And this
to
is
me.
his most specific like genre feeling book. I mean, there's horrific things happen in all Chuck Palahniuk books, but this one felt firmly entrenched, and like you can see the movie of The Invention of
Oh
Sound
my
in
god.
your head while you're reading it. Like,
Hmm.
and that's very Palahniuk. He's very he paints a picture for you, even when he's kind of doing minimalist stuff. Like, and it actually works in towards like being a movie because of how minimalist it is. Because it's
Hmm.
like it's all meat and potatoes.
Well,
Like,
it's like that artist Trite, right? Like less is more. Like you can get so impactful like
yeah,
with that, right? And like the more you get to imagine it yourself, it's just like like because we both read like a lot of Stephen King, right?
mhm.
Sometimes like like some passages you're reading, there's no room for interpretation. Like
So,
you know exactly where you are, what you're
like
seeing, what you're looking at,
it's like
right?
Jesus, Steve. I don't need to have the road described to me. The
It,
feeling of the asphalt. I'm sure it's a magical thing for you, Steve, bringing you back to your youth. You
it, it,
fucking psycho. But yeah,
it's a goddamn road, man.
Stephen King's
Just move
also
on,
he's a
move on.
guy I really like his prose. He's another
Yeah.
writer. I just like the flow of his language. Actually, out of the audiobooks I've ever listened to in my life, the person that's work is elevated the most by audiobooks is Stephen King. It feels like they are meant to be read out loud. Like just the pacing and the tempo of it, and um some really great Stephen King audiobooks out there.
But the general like structure of this book, while we're still in the spoiler-free things. So it's like written in third person omniscient. It's broken down into 3 major acts, which has very clever titles for each act that it's in. And kind of speaking to your criticism earlier that listening to it, it's hard, like, to flip going back and forth,
Yeah.
to each character, but they pretty much drive that. And then the first act is basically just like hardcore character development. And then it's like
Yes.
forgive us our trespasses is the title of the first one, right? And
Yeah.
it's just like a little tongue in cheek, right? Because he's
Mhm.
tying in like some biblical shit, like into some like really heinous shit, like with these like broken characters going into it. And then like the second act of it, tape bleed, where and this isn't a spoiler, but they talk into this old Grateful Dead effect accident that happened where it when they were recording, the sound bleeded into another part of the thing and made it like a beautiful mess that the industry tried to replicate over and
Yeah.
over, right? But it's a great metaphor for like what's actually happened in the second act, with all these desperate like characters that we have start to intertwine.
Yeah.
And
The
then the third
convergence.
act,
Yeah.
called The Perfect Scream, which the main one of the main characters, Mitzi Ives, is a folio artist that specializes in screams, because in that, and like as you read the novel, you'll realize, like that's such a great title for the third act, and it just really comes in together. I did see like a lot of people online, other people thought that it was like a lot of incoherent, and then he just tried to like tie everything in there at the end. But I'm telling you, it's like somebody like listened to it like twice and got the stew on it. I don't think that's the case. I thought he did a good job, like talking
Yeah.
with that. So like read like again, like you said, you gave the caveat at the beginning. Reading it is like so much richer, to listen to sometimes. It was certain works, but this is definitely one of them. I do wish that I read it first, but like the more like I think about it, I don't know how he could have interacted and like told that same story.
No, because he was doing something that was super tight.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just not a lot going on outside of like those two characters and what they're going through. Like I said, it's very like cinematic in that way. It's
Mm-hmm.
clearly like a 3-act movie, a
Mm-hmm.
3-act story, and then
Yeah.
you get to the third act, and that's all your payoffs.
Yep.
And it happens very quickly.
It
Everything
does.
happens like boom, 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 up until the very end, which when it gets really wild, and the last like I would say, listening to an audiobook, the last like 20 minutes are like very wild.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all it's all building up to that stuff, and it's all the payoff, and that's why actually I think I was so happy I got a chance to listen to it a second time, because you can see how he's building towards that third act. You can appreciate it because
Yeah.
you know what happens, so you can
Exactly.
actually appreciate all the little foreshadowing and the seeds he's planting with everything. And I mean, is some of it like a little silly and contrived? Yes, like it gets very it all, I would say it comes kind of close to jumping the shark a little bit.
Well, with the excessive use of foreshadowing, because he does that a lot.
Yes, yeah, but you don't know that until the second time through. At least I didn't. Like I didn't understand like what they
Even I would counter that with that. Even like the first time listening to it, you hear it like because if you recognize like about like half a dozen things from like previous, then he foreshadowed at least a half a dozen times, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that there's any limit to it, but it's just kind of like okay.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, what was it felt like a movie,
Mhm.
because it was like, no, I want to make sure you understand a little bit, like the point I'm driving here, and the where the characters are going. Like, nothing was nothing was super. Like the first act, I had a completely different conceptualization where I thought that story was going to go.
Uh-huh.
I had a completely different idea where I thought that story was going to go. I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be much more straightforward. I thought it was going to be a little bit more like, oh, here's this guy, here's this Foley artist. He gets like, this is not a major spoiler, although we should probably just get into spoilers.
Let's get into spoilers, man.
All right, let's get into spoilers. So right now, everybody,
there's going to be a big annoying like sign right now flashing that says spoiler
Paul really
alert.
liked the book. I really liked it as well. I don't think it's Palahniuk's best book, but I do think it's part and parcel with his larger works. And if you like Chuck Palahniuk as in general, I think you'll like Invention of Sound. If you've never read a Chuck Palahniuk book before, I would suggest going back and reading some of his earlier stuff first. I would recommend Survivor, Choke, and Fight Club. That's kind of like that's like a good 3 early book, uh, just set of books that he wrote all around the same time that really give you a primer for everything he did after that. If you really want to understand like how he writes, and he's a guy that's experimented a lot with different formats and different styles. Even the invention of sound is a little experimental in the way that it flips back and forth between characters without really telling you or bringing it to your attention until later. Which that could be a that it could have been done on purpose, but I digress. I think we both really liked it.
So like one of the things that was just like so absurd is just like so like Foster would hire prostitutes to act like his daughter, pretend it was
Yeah,
his daughter. So what he would go hire some talent out there from this agency that he would frequent, and he would pick whoever the woman was based off of like
an
these
AI rendering, an
yeah, the
artist
AI
render of what
rendering
his
of
daughter
what his daughter
would
could
look
look
like.
like, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's just kind of like a thing that kind of gets into the first act when we get that hardcore like
yeah.
character development.
That's like halfway through the first act where he that starts happening because it's all built up with this kind of like his unhinged nature, like how
Hmm.
far down the road he is. They set up the fact that he's in that self help group for people that are like survivors of having lost a child or a child that was abducted.
Yeah.
Um, they never make it explicit, at least, and maybe you can correct me if he knows for sure that his daughter was kidnapped by sex traffickers. I don't think that's like something that he knows for sure.
No, he he
He
he
just
never
thinks that.
knows. He never knows, right? And like we kind of get into that at the end of the first act when it's when it starts tying in his line with Mitzi Ives when he hears his daughter's voice in a film
Yes,
and
which
like
is
a slash horror film, right?
okay.
And so
Well,
and but like the narrator like states, it wasn't his daughter's voice until it was his daughter's voice, right?
yeah, because
From that film.
he's got like confirmation bias.
Hmm.
He sees what he wants to see sometimes, and okay, let me tell you what I thought was going to happen at the end of the first act. I thought we were going to do this like dark web, Hollywood pedophiles, some secret like cult thing or something, some secret society stuff, and that he in the first act he has a portion of tape with his what he thinks is his daughter, but it has no sound.
Yeah, he has a grainy video
Okay.
of her
So
being
what I thought was going to happen is he was going to meet the Foley artist, and because of her kind of supernatural ability to be a good Foley artist and create like things that are more real than real, I
right.
thought that she was going to make the sounds for the video and be able to intuit like a clue
Mm,
by creating the soundscape for the video. That's what I thought was going to happen. That's
right.
not all what happens. But
Yeah.
that's what I thought it was going to be more of like this kind of like a mystery thriller in that way, like a more straightforward.
Right.
That's not at all what the fuck happens at all. It's much more of a character piece.
Right.
Yeah, and it's really as much as plot driven as it is. The plot only really comes into play,
In the third act.
in the third act. Yeah,
No,
or I would say, well, like towards the end of the second act, there's a few big reveals, but
that's fair, right? And that kind of ties into the title of the second act, like tape bleed, right? Because we still are like wrapping up like character development, and then he starts like merging into where all these different characters and their timeline where they start intertwining, right? They start getting into that. But one thing that you were talking about earlier in the non spoiler section was we're talking about like the absurd like situations that he's in, right? Like where the book starts off, right? So
yeah,
he's like in an airport, just sitting there like drinking, and so he's on the dark web, and he has this character constantly goes through different like images that he gets of like known child pornographers, and molesters, and he's constantly scrolling because he's on the lookout,
yeah,
and it's kind of like what was it like Bill Walsh?
Bill Walsh? Bill Walsh? No, it's John Walsh. John, America's most wanted Walsh. John, in pursuit Walsh. Don't you fucking...
Remember like when we were kids in the 90s with Blockbuster, you always used to do these things to advocate for missing and lost children.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So he's trying to be like just trying to be like that, but like a more hardcore. like the Chuck Norris version, like
Yeah.
watch it.
He's
Just
out
like
on the streets.
I am a man on the streets. I'm going to track this fucker down. I'm going to get him right. So he's constantly scrolling that and he's studying these like pedo asses like online, so that way if he sees them, he can unleash 17 years of pent up rage and depression of his own personal loss out on this person, because that's all he can do. That's all he can do, right? And most of the novel, he's griping with acknowledging that his daughter's dead, but not want to believe it. So that's like it's like twisting him up like all through that too, right? But they're at the airport and he's scrolling through his phone. He's at the airport bar, scrolling through his phone, and he sees a guy who looks like somebody on the dark web that he's been checking, dreads, and then goes ahead and fucking like tackles him and just try to like so dramatic and like this man is a child pornographer, like everyone's and then everyone's like jumping in, just this whole thing, and then he has like this whole dramatic thing where he pulls the girl that the guy had with him away, and he's like, you don't need to be a sex slave anymore, honey, you're safe now.
Well, that's what I meant about like it being kind of this observation of internet culture and how that can like really fuck with a person because of the whole dark web. Like there are people that do nothing but like look into dark web stuff and they want to be pedophile hunters. There's a whole subculture. There's a whole subset of, this is a future nightcap. There's a whole subset of people like that's all they do. And they see it everywhere. And that's why, like, it's like in like QAnon. Like there was a whole thread about QAnon about how Donald Trump was going to arrest all the pedophiles.
Well, it more like a more relative like thing too. It's like Pizzagate, right? Or people.
But that's like, exactly because that is somebody that like would feel like they were activated by a story like that. Go to somewhere like Comet Pizza, and then say that to do something like that. Like that is something that could happen, or you could imagine happening. That's somebody that's like obsessed with online stuff and conspiracy theories, etc. I mean, and that's basically at the point we meet Gates Foster. Like that's where he's at in his life. He's obsessed. He's completely fucked in the head with conspiracy stuff. And then we find, as the story goes on, we find that he's part of the self-help group, which is actually not a real self-help group. It's actually a group of actors that are part of like a secret society, and they've been grooming him to ascend, to take over because of his rage. Like they've basically been gaslighting him and feeding him information to get to the end of the story, to where we find everybody at the end of the book.
Right.
And that so he can, because he expresses it pretty early on. He's like, I hope I don't find the right guy first. I hope I find 17 people that know that guy so I can torture them. And they can and make them tell me where that guy is, because that's what he wants, catharsis through violence.
Exactly. He wants his journey to never end, right? And
it's like the character from Memento. It's like the movie Memento.
I'm not a killer. I'm just someone who wanted to make things right. Can I just let myself forget what you've told me?
Yeah, exactly. Like I want to, like, why? What else am I going to do at this point? What would my life be if I end it now, right?
Yeah. And I think like a lot of that stuff, even with the stuff with his character, like with the prostitute, like it's like acknowledging people's weird hypocrisies. Like he's involved in something that is just as like, could like those like girls could be sex trafficked. Like he doesn't know that.
No, exactly. But that he's blinded with his own like self sense of like righteousness and like just trying to do that, right? And you see like really where he becomes unhinged with the prostitute, because one of the prostitutes that he frequents on this started understanding the story of his daughter better than he did.
Yeah,
like he's losing because his mind, he's not well. He's not a well person.
No,
he's going through this, and like he's starting to lose details, and this prostitute is remembering more, and then there's a scene in there where he starts like losing his shit over this, because like not only because he did this, he's using the prostitute for a sense of control, tried to like do this. The narrator even mentioned something like it was expensive, but it was more effective than any therapy could provide him, right?
Yeah.
And so this is a sense of like a form of like control for something that he couldn't uncontrol, right? Because you think about like how devastating that is as a father
Yes.
to lose a child, right?
And
How like emasculating that could be, like all these like
yeah,
terrible emotions that could be, like
the
you've
impotent
lost.
rage, the helplessness, right?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so now you're trying to recreate this thing here in a very like dubious fashion, right? And in a fashion that where he could be exploiting the people that he's trying to, that he made his life's mission, right? That's
Yeah.
very at point. I didn't actually look at that angle before, but yeah, he's engaged in something that that he's like could possibly be tracking people down for, right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
but just do it. But like, but they get to this one part in the book where, like, this actress, because he frequents her a lot, she knows the story, the backstory, better than he does at this point in time, and then he just becomes like enraged that she's knowing this and she's correcting him on
Hmm.
the backstory, because every time he like takes one of these prostitutes out, it's they just go over like a fake line, how's your day, where are you going to school, and like
Yeah.
he gives them the whole script. They're sticking to the script, they can remember that, but he's losing it. And it's simultaneously being brought to like where his character is at this point in the novel, where he's starting to really unravel with his rage, where he can't even remember the details of his own daughter, and someone that he hires once a week has a better grasp or like memory of that than like he does.
Yeah.
And when this happens with the particular prostitute that he frequents, he just fucking loses it on her. And there's a point in there, like, just like,
Yeah.
is
Because
he
he's
gonna?
chased. Doesn't he chase me through the
He
hotel with a
chases her.
gun?
He chases her to the hotel, right? And like
He's if
he
I
gets
ever fucking see
crazy.
you again, I will fucking find you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're just like, is he going to kill this bitch? Like, is this going to happen? Like,
Well, it's also it's interesting. Like, there's also like a subtext there about like like there's a parallel between what Mitzi does for a living, which is she's involved in movies. She's a Foley artist, like you said. It's about immortality. It's about like this. That's what he's trying to do with those people, and like the art that he has created through making these prostitutes actresses is actually more powerful than his real life, than his own circumstances.
sure,
I mean, like in the same way that like Mitzi goes into like a little bit of a tangent or a diatribe about when she's recording screams, she's making those people live forever.
yeah,
So when he's like coaching these prostitutes to become his daughter, for lack of a way to put it, he's giving his daughter a second life
yeah,
that
he,
that is larger than him.
yep,
Like, and then when his memory starts fading, as people do, it's like a normal thing. It's like a tragic thing that happens. Like when you lose somebody and you feel like their memories fade a little bit more every year. Like that's what he's starting to experience. It's been 17 years of this.
right,
And now it's become about something completely separate from his daughter. Like it's not about his daughter anymore. It's about, like you said earlier, it's like about his life, his purpose.
sure,
And that he finds that upsetting. He finds that upsetting. Like like the power that he's given over to these women, basically.
hmm. So let's get into Mitzi Ives a
Yeah.
little bit, right? Yeah, so she's a folio artist. She specializes in getting the perfect screams, right? That's what she's going to do, and just like Foster, just like a tragic upbringing, right? So like when we get into her, like it's hammered out in the first act, and then more things revealed in the second act that just make you feel like, God damn, like this is such a broken person. Like this is such a fucking tragedy,
Yeah.
such a tragedy of a person. Like what is keeping this person going, right?
Well, but
Like,
she has just like her character has like a very interesting perspective on like the work she does as a Foley artist. I touched on a little bit a second ago about this idea of like creating immortality. That's the power of art. It outlasts us all. And isn't it worth like a sacrifice to make that thing, right?
right,
And as people that are like kind of amateur artists ourselves, we kind of understand that sentiment, this
right.
extension of us that could live beyond us. And even if people didn't know it was us that created it.
And their artistic like drive to their artistic integrity, right? Like
Yes.
this needs to be pure, right?
But because
Because
she looks at it as a woman, like she looks at it as like specifically a female perspective. She even makes like a note to say that she feels like she's working in like this last wave of feminism.
a little bit, right? Because there's a lot of like shouts to fourth wave feminism, where like we can like be woman can kill, but they can never kill another woman. They do this like
Oh
he
my
does this
dude,
whole like
dude, he has
there's
this line. I sent it to you on Signal.
yeah, he did.
Only a gay guy could write this and get away with it. Which is and which takes on like this double meaning once you finish the book, which is women measure progress with whether or not they can kill something, which you think is like a reference to abortion, which I think it's
I think it's definitely
it is a
into
reference to
that.
abortion, but once you understand that she's literally killing people,
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, well that's the big
to make her
thing about Mitzi Ives, right? And he
which
gets
is
into
revealed
this
pretty
world about like
fairly early on, and then the weird processes, and that she takes Ambien and drinks wine so she
well,
doesn't
that's the
remember.
thing. That's the thing. I would argue like throughout most of like the second act, like you're not really sure. Like, is she killing people to get these perfect screams, or is she not? Right?
Yeah,
Up
it's a little
until
ambiguous for a
yeah.
little while.
And
Yeah,
well, that's the thing with like where the Ambien, plays in stuff like that, and you go in there, and then like the other character, it's like a little support character, Doctor Adama, right? Who's like this witch doctor that
yeah.
she sees to like help like clean up the mess or whatnot, but he's
Yeah,
not.
he comes in and does an exposition dump where he's just
Mm-hmm.
like, "Let me tell you what's really going on, Mitzi.
Mm-hmm.
Your
Right.
father was a famous artist, also a serial killer."
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess that's where you start with Mitzi, is that it's a family business, and her father, was just like this piece of shit, and then he got into like this smut audio, right? They were going to make you want to scream, I'll give you a real scream. No, quite literally a real scream.
Yeah.
It is. Like so, and like one of the things too is that they like reveal later in the novel is that one of her like her mother dies from her father, and he uses her death, you know, as a scream
Mhm.
for like films in there
Yeah.
as well, and then which is kind of like a good segue for the other like important like side character is Slow, who's a movie producer that is kind of like a father figure to Mitzi, which we kind of figure out like or at least maybe I'm like overreaching, but I'm like it's probably actually her father, her real father, or if it's not a real father, it's because the reason why her father killed her mother was that because she was having an affair with Slow.
Yeah.
So, like so
I don't think I think he's just like part of the. I mean, he's obviously part of the control, like part of the secret society or whatever that's revealed towards the end of the book. I think, and he's there to like keep Mitzi doing what she's doing, kind of in the same way that when Gates Foster's at the group therapy, that's what they're doing. They're trying to control him and lead him into a very particular direction. And I think that's what's kind of going on with Mitzi and that guy. One of the themes of Mitzi and one of the themes of the book is the commodification of the human experience and what we do to people through art and commerce and how those things intersect, right? And that's a big part of her thing with the Foley artist and capturing the perfect screams. And like she goes through the history of it and how much money you can make off of a scream long term. That's why people are willing to pay you $50,000 for a great scream because they're going to be able to use it in things for 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because like once it's revealed that those screams are real, it adds this interesting layer because there's a commentary on like how audiences perceive genre stuff, like cheap genre stuff. They feel safe to go in and watch and enjoy like a torture porn movie because it's not real. Like it's not real. It's a safe way to experience like some of the darkest aspects of humanity is through art.
Right.
And we kind of take advantage of that and we pick at that when we create things. And and we're comfortable with it because there's an abstraction there. It's not real life. It's an abstraction. So we're comfortable with what we're watching, even though the reality of that would be horrific. And as an audience member in this world, people don't realize that they're actually listening to real people dying, which adds this other weird layer about people's enjoyment of certain types of things without really acknowledging what they're enjoying. Mitzi's the same way. Mitzi takes Ambien and drinks wine so that she is kind of like this pure vessel. She has like plausible deniability in a weird way, and that's something that's set up and encouraged by her handlers, basically.
Right. The same way Foster is being like handled by his rage, right?
Yeah, because like that's what the self-help group is feeding Foster a little. They give him that clue. They give him that thing that makes him think it's his daughter.
Palahniuk can have used like so many different ways to have like Foster engage with somebody, right? And now again, this is more like towards you because you've read a lot of his other like novels, but there's a lot of like self-help group, support groups like scenes in Fight Club, and then here, a big part of this book, at least with Foster's character development, is in that same type of setting, right? So
Yeah,
like you're just reading it and it's just kind of painted. You can't help but think about like scenes of Fight Club and all those different like self-help group
of
rooms,
course.
or like and other like famous movies out there as well that have like the the dark like basement with chairs and like cheap
Yeah.
coffee and refreshments on the side and like that bring this in there. So like, what do you think with well, I guess it would have been because of losing a child, and that's why he's like going to a self group there. So I was just wondering, like, is that like something common that he does like in other books where he's like using that venue, or is it just coincidentally like
No, that is
I've
all.
only read Fight Club and now I've
No,
read
there's
this
a
one?
few. There's definitely a few books where he always touches on that kind of stuff, like self improvement, self help, and I
Yeah,
think that's because it's indicative of the time where he came up in. Like in the '90s, prescription drugs and self help was like a big industry. Those were big industries. They were
right,
booming. Psychology was like a big thing. That's when everybody and their mother went back to college to go become psychologists.
sure,
Now we have like ballet or underwater dance routines. That's what people go to college for now. Back in the '90s, everybody was like, "Oh, I want to be a psychologist. I want to be a sociologist." I remember when, we're old enough where we experienced a little bit of that when we were when we were teenagers coming through high school, thinking
yeah.
about what you're
Everybody
going to
wanted to be
do.
a psych major.
Everybody wanted to be a psych major, and I think a lot of that is born out of that stuff. And I think he kind of recognizes what self help is. It's a form of commiseration, but it's also desperate people like want answers. They want control. They want to be controlled. Everybody wants to be
Yeah,
controlled. They want to be given an answer. They want to be given a path. That's why I think when we did our Fight Club episode, that's what we were kind of ended up talking about a lot. Thematically, it's about like looking for gurus, looking for people to give you purpose, make
right.
sense of things,
Or direction, right? So
directions.
because
Well,
that
or
was
directions, right?
yeah,
Same thing here. That's what like when Gates Foster is at these self help groups, that's what he's looking for. He's looking for commiseration and he's also looking for answers. And it's also people to uh, share his theories with because they're
yeah,
all desperate people too.
yeah,
Only to find out that they're not really desperate people. They're all hired actors.
yeah.
And that he's like he's a Manchurian candidate.
No, 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 exactly. But so there's one thing I wanted to talk about, like Foster and like with the secret society and the self help group things as well, which kind of like led into his breakdown with the prostitute when she started realizing the script better than he did, because like it just stuck out for me a lot for whatever because he kept going into doing like the pot roast story.
Guy goes to a dinner party. He finds himself in the kitchen with a hostess, and he asks the hostess, "Why do you cut the ends off to your pot roast? Doesn't make sense to me." "Well, that's what my mother always did." And my mother's actually here. Let me ask her. She comes in the kitchen, and he asks her, "Why do you cut the ends off to my pot roast?" She says, "Well, that's what my mother always did, so I just did it." And as a matter of fact, my mother's here. Sure enough, the woman comes in, the older lady. "Why you cut the ends off to your pot roast?" "Well, to be honest with you, I had a very small pot roast pan. In order to fit the pot roast into the pan, I had to cut the ends off."
With his daughter. Now, the pot roast story is like a famous old like adage of don't do things, basically don't do things because that's the way we've already done them. That
Yeah.
wasn't unique to that. And I was just trying to think like was Palahniuk using that as like a device to show that he's like actually like lost it. He's just not in touch with reality anymore because that obviously didn't happen. That wasn't an exchange he had with his daughter, like using the story, and he's just kind of reminiscing, like because we always romanticize, we always make people that we love or memories of people that we love, better than what they were, whether we want to
Yes.
admit it or not, right?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's like idyllic. It's like
So
it's like Leave It to Beaver 1950s idealism.
right, so like yeah, is that where he was going with that?
I think that's what it's there to represent because, like you said, like we would look back fondly with like rose tinted glasses on the people we've lost or the people that we pine for. And that's like Gates Foster's version of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's his way to do it. And then it kind of makes and then I think Palahniuk did it also because it draws a parallel between how Mitzi Ives makes Foley sounds
Right.
with the food and the mentioning of the food and how something sounds when it gets cut and blah blah blah. So it's like trying to draw a connection like on a subconscious level between the two
Yeah.
characters. You know what I mean?
No, I get that.
I mean, there's this whole thing where Mitzi's with like a girl that the girl doesn't know that she's about to die, who Mitzi is drugged and that she's going to kill to get the scream. And she just has her like naming off foods. And then Mitzi, leads Mitzi into a tangent about the types of foods that are used for Foley work.
Right.
So that becomes like a thing that becomes part of like the fantasy world. So he's kind of, I think he's drawing a connection there. You know what I mean?
I gotcha. So, like, how did you feel, like, in general with, like, the secret society, like, coming in at the end? Like, did you think that was, like, too contrived, or did
I thought
you
it
think...
was incredibly contrived, but I didn't dislike it. And I didn't dislike it because I thought it is like a commentary on how people that are like deep in the internet think about the world.
Right.
It's like how paranoid schizophrenics think about their life.
Right.
Like people that think they're always being watched and chased, and they're the star of their own movie. They're in deep in something. Oh shit!
Right.
Because the government's out there watching me, dude. I've been on these websites. I'm trying to find the truth. I'm hunting things down. So it kind of like feeds into that idea, and then you're like, well, what if it was true? Like, what if it actually was happening to you?
Right.
Because and I think it's a fair criticism that the last act is like so fucking. It's an hour, and it's just like barrels through everything he set up. It's like a truck just driving through all of it, like just to get to the end, right? It's like very breakneck pace, and it's like, man, I don't know if I would want him to actually explore that stuff more in depth, because like once you start explaining things like that, then it just usually becomes worse.
Right.
And like having and allowing me as the reader to kind of fill in that stuff with all of my knowledge of like internet culture, like what I am, which I could totally be projecting on this book. I don't think I am, just because I'm familiar with Chuck's work in the past few years.
Right.
Seems like he knows about this stuff. I've heard some interviews with him where he talks about he knows a lot of spicy characters.
Right.
He has correspondence with some very spicy people out there. So he's a little more plugged in than most people.
Right.
For sure. So I guess I liked that he's given me a room for my imagination to run a little wild with that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I thought it was fun. Like it's kind of a fun twist,
I know. Overall, like I think it's a fun book. It is like a horror book, but I still thought it was like a fun experience.
Yeah.
The one thing I did want to ask you was like Blush Gentry, like her, like
Dude,
what go well, for it.
Okay, well, I'll give my best. She's part of this, and
part of this, like in a vessel, right? Like a useful idiot, right? Because that's what I was trying to figure out. Like, did she at what extent did she know that
I think
was
she knew
part
a
of
lot.
this?
I think she knew a lot.
Okay,
she's an actress. She was she's part of the society, and she was tasked with this role. And then as the book ends, like for this weird, fucked up new nuclear family that's been created with Gates Foster and Blush and the new baby.
Mm-hmm.
And
the baby is from Mitzi Ives, and the boyfriend is just this degenerate, like tattooed cover, like like low life that she like purposely sourced out because of like the size of his thighs, because he could crush her, just do basically like BDSM like shit with her, who she ends up like killing. Like anyways, right? So it's just like, it's just nuts. But anyways,
I mean, the end of the book, the guy, it's because it's about like this idea of like being reborn, like literally through this process. I mean, so like he goes into the pits, Gates Foster goes into the pits of hell, into his nightmare, and rips a baby out of a woman's womb.
Mitzi Ives, Gates Foster rips the baby out of Mitzi Ives' womb.
Yeah, it's fucking nuts. It kind of comes out. It comes out of it. It doesn't. I felt like it came out of left field, but the more that I've sat with it, I don't think it is as like crazy as
No, I
like
felt the same way.
yeah, because you're like holy shit, like
Well, there's a bit of like foreshadowing, right? Because like slow. Because here's the thing, too. Because they talk about that limbic resonance thing, and these are other biblical reference with the trumpets, like tearing down the walls, and
yeah,
he's going to the Academy Awards, knowing that like what's going to happen, but he's still going, which I still haven't like fully figured out whether or not like the higher up said like, hey, it's time for you to check out. This is where you check out,
yeah.
type of thing, right? So like it's I don't
Well,
know,
they're
man.
Hollywood people. This is about the nature of Hollywood as well, which I thought he was going to be way more vicious towards. And it's not. I think it's all in the subtext, like kind of the vicious indifference and the commodification, like I said, of the human experience, and how they're kind of indifferent to that. They're indifferent to the process, like some of these people. They're just there for the accolades, for the star power, for whatever. And it's almost like this is what you got to do. You got to like pay your fucking dues.
Mm,
Like you got to no, you got to be part of it. You got to be part of
right.
the system. And then Gates Foster, which this is something I am a little foggy on, and maybe you can help me understand it better. It's like why is Gates Foster is chosen to be like the new guy?
Your end is going to be the same way from somebody that you bring up into this business, right?
Yeah,
And then like what does she do? Like like for a couple weeks before she ends up getting like stabbed to death by Foster, was showing him how to read film. I'm sorry, how to like read sound, how to work all the equipment and
yeah,
everything like that, right? And then she even ends up getting another actress to recreate the voice of Foster's daughter, so it actually happens, which was pretty just like pretty wild, and like I'm still chomping on that, but
yeah.
yeah.
Is it Rob?
The
Who's Gate?
Rob was the guy that led the meetings, the
Yes,
fake help.
yeah. The fake meetings. He says to Gates Foster, he says like Gates Foster's like, why did you pick me? He's like,
So
because you showed up.
well, it not only
You
showed
showed
up.
up.
Well, it was like one of my favorite lines too. Is like a good agent is one that doesn't know that he's an agent, right?
Yes, yeah,
But
of
like
course.
but I
Which is
dodged on
Hollywood
I dodged on your
cliche. It's cliche Hollywood bullshit because
mm-hmm,
they're all cliche Hollywood fucks.
mm-hmm,
They're all like C tier actors that just want a job. It was kind of a commentary like actors will literally do anything
mm-hmm.
for a job
Well,
for
that's
work.
and that's kind of like what you get out of the Blush Gentry character too. Is just like
Yes.
that, like the like that great Sherlock Holmes, the Guy Ritchie version, where he's like, your depravity knows no bounds, right? Like that's like Blush Gentry, like that's Hollywood, right? That's a lot of these like people in there
Well, and
too.
even she even acknowledges like pretty early on like that this is must be a setup because they're like you got into Comic-Con, which is funny that the Comic-Con and the Academy Awards make an appearance here. And
Hmm.
she's like, and you got in with a gun and stuff. You wouldn't have gotten in if they didn't want you to.
Right?
What's going on?
Yeah.
And then he feels even more paranoid and more like, what's going on? Like,
Like Foster Gates like kidnap. Well, he doesn't kidnap. He wants to ask Blush Gentry because she is the actress in a movie, this B horror film that
his daughter's
where
scream
he
is in.
is convinced his daughter's voice is in, so he wants to go find her. Did you do that scream or not? Right? And then she ends up like oh, he's kidnapping me, and then like forces her kidnap for basically like a career boost, right? So
Yes. Yeah.
so it's going on there, but like but anyways, but like why they chose like why they wanted to make like Foster the new folio artist is because that's like what I was like struggling with the secret society is just like they wanted to keep it going, but obviously the players that existed, being Schlo and Mitzi Ives, had to be out per the society's like decision, whatnot. And who are we going to do that can violently who are we going to pick that can violently recreate the screams that we will want?
Yeah.
It's going to be this guy that has nothing to live for, but to make those sounds come out of people that he suspects, did terrible things to his daughter, like in other people.
Well, and he
And
shows his
so,
true
and that
colors. He shows his true colors at the end of the book. He knows that he's not
at
going
the
to
very
find
end,
him,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and he's just like, but I'm going to do it anyways.
But I'm going to do it anyways. And then he even acknowledges, even if I mess up, it still won't, still won't be totally in vain. There'll be some bad people that get hurt in the pursuit.
Well, that's
So,
because it becomes about this like catharsis, this fulfillment of a fantasy. Even Blush Gendry telling him that this is a setup How did you get in here with a gun?
Mhm.
Is feeds into the fantasy that he's in as the character in a conspiracy theory.
Right. No. Yeah. No.
It
It
does. I
really
mean, like,
does.
listen, and some of this stuff is only becoming clear to me now that we're talking about it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? As we're talking through it, I'm seeing even more of like the layers and stuff that Palahniuk had in there about
Mhm.
like with the character stuff. It's actually making me like the book more.
Yeah, dude, it's a great book because he said a couple times in the beginning, non-spoiler sections, but like it's like very cinematic. Like what do you think about Zoller take on this one?
Oh, dude, that would be sick.
When
S. Craig Zoller usually writes his own stuff, but like that would be awesome. Yeah,
what?
I would love if S. Craig Zoller
I
did a
just think
version of
I
the
just think
Invention of
he
Sound.
I just think he would nail both the absurdity.
Do what I say or I'll kill him.
Of
Dude,
it, and it would kill the horror aspect. No pun intended. Like, right? I think he'd be able to do both like so well in this, and you would
yeah,
need
dude,
somebody
you
with
get
that type of.
You get Vince Vaughn to be Gates Foster. You get Robert Downey Jr. to be Slow. You get Mel Gibson to play Dr. Amata. Oh yeah.
No,
Who
we
plays
can
the
get
girl?
going.
Who plays Mitzi? What's her name?
Hella Bog Connor. Just
Helena Bonham Carter. No. She's too.
no,
No, you got to find somebody more innocent
no,
looking,
no,
like
no. What's that?
Naomi
What's that?
Watts.
What's
Naomi
that British girl
Watts.
I like? What's that? Keira Knightley.
Keira Knightley? Ah, no. Really?
No.
Keira Knightley?
Well, fuck you. Yeah, Keira Knightley.
I
Yeah,
was gonna say Naomi Watts.
yeah. Let's go with Keira because I still got a crush on her.
Okay, Keira
So
Knightley.
yeah. She'll take the work. She'll take the work. She'll take
Well,
the
you're
work.
done. You're done.
Mm. Yeah,
Problem solved.
that'd be a great one. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start making like fake movie posters of Zoller doing like to the author Fight Club,
Dude, you can
and the director. I'm
just
going to start
get
doing
his,
this. I'm going to start posting on Twitter.
just
That's what
get
I'm
his
going to do.
just get his email and send it to him. He probably love it. Like,
Yeah.
yo, you ever read The Invention of Sound by Chuck Palahniuk?
Mm-hmm.
Yo,
Yeah. Oh
you know,
yeah.
they tried to crowdfund a Chuck Palahniuk movie like years ago for
Oh really?
for this book he did called Lullaby, which is a pretty decent book. Another book that like goes crazy towards the end. Like about this ancient lullaby, this culling sound, like this death lullaby, and if you hear it, like you die. He has a great when you describe his books in like a sentence, you're like, wow, that sounds very fucking intriguing.
Mm-hmm. Oh no,
Um,
for sure, man.
yeah, but I could see the movie when I was reading it. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
just felt like because it's so tight too. Like you wouldn't. It feels like in the same way like Fight Club is tight. Like you don't need to do a ton of like adapting.
Mm-hmm.
You could kind of do just you could take out. So there is some extemporaneous or just some fat here that could definitely be trimmed. He does like have a preoccupation with how the process of things, and he likes to describe them in very explicit detail. Which I, for the most part, I actually really appreciate. Like, it was actually kind of fascinating just kind of reading about the history of Foley work. And
It was. Didn't you feel like I felt like I was an expert after like reading all
Yeah.
this stuff too, right?
Yeah.
And then like the little diatribes, like Mitzi would have in a novel talking about like we've gone so far away with other things, but like in terms of sound, we're still in the dark ages, and
Mhm.
then like just everything. I liked all the references he made, like to the Wilhelm scream. They even reference like the Yahoo like a sound bit like case
well,
like
it made you think about it in a way that you'd never thought about before,
no,
right? Because
exactly.
we take these things for granted. We're aware that they are sound effects and that they're put in movies, but we don't think about like the industry side of that. Where it's
Right.
like, oh, somebody owns the rights to that scream.
It's crazy.
Somebody gets paid every time that's in a movie. Like
Yeah.
that's and the fact that it just also just kind of acknowledging like, oh yeah, they probably do reuse this stuff all the time.
Yeah. Oh, dude, it was great experience, man. Listening to this novel again. I wish I read it, but but like listening to it, it's not going to kill it. Just like unless if you are, that's all you're doing is listening to it, you'll be fine. But if you're not, if you're like a commuter like me, you'll probably have to listen to it a couple times,
Yeah.
to get it. But I don't know what else we could say that we haven't really like said before. Like we hit all the main characters, man, and I think like the main the plots and the provocativeness of
Yeah.
everything, the ridiculousness, the absurdity
I think
of the world.
it's a much more smart book than people I think give it credit for, based on the few reviews that I've seen and things I've read. Palahniuk is a guy. He's a student of form, and he likes to mess with the form, and he likes to do interesting things. Like so much of this book, so much of the horrific stuff in this book is he called it, I think he called it tableau horror, where he's like, we don't see anything happen. We come in after it happens, and then we speculate about what must have happened,
Mm-hmm.
which is sometimes more horrific than the thing that actually happened.
Right.
And he's like, and I didn't want to blow my load. I wanted to blow my load at the end. So every really horrific scene, you're actually just learning about after the fact, which kind of lessens the impact. You could be more intellectual about it. You could be more considerate. It's like an exercise, like a thought experiment at that point,
Yeah.
which I thought was an interesting tack to take. And he actually even referenced David Fincher's Seven.
Yeah.
Because
You just took it right out of my mouth.
What he said about
like,
Seven was, he's like, all of this, when you find the deadly sins, it's after.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't actually see anything horrific happen for most of that movie. It's just
don't.
people telling you about the horrific thing that happened.
Mm-hmm. And then your mind goes to town. Your mind goes to crazy town. Your mind goes to crazy town, just like the dude with the dildo crying.
No, but that's
the dildo with the knife.
Dude, that is one of the most powerful moments in a movie ever, because you will never forget that.
No.
And it's that guy's performance. He's a great character.
We're like 14, 15 when we saw that. We still remember
dude,
that.
Probably
man.
even younger than that, dude. We were sick fucks. Palahniuk as a writer does a great job of inviting you to fill in gaps.
Yeah.
To create pictures.
Mm-hmm.
To you go there. He's not taking you there. He's just giving you
enough to go.
He's giving you a little clues here and there. He's like, what do you think about that?
I can't tell you how many times, like in between meetings at work, or driving back from work and stuff, like just chomping on what I listened to earlier. Just like, wait. So deep state. They got a deep state shit going on. Who's doing what? What was slow? Oh my god! It was great, man. It was great. It was just a good, at the end of the day, right? We talk about this. Did they make their objective? And,
I think so.
Yeah.
It's not like I don't think it's Palahniuk's best book, like I said in the non-spoiler thing, but I do think it's a worthy entry into his canon. It's better than Adjustment Day. I'll say that. And I thought Adjustment Day was okay, but this one is a little bit more palatable as well.
But on the Audible, 1 through 5 stars, there, what are you hitting?
I would give this a solid 3.75 or a 4 if I was feeling generous.
You fucking nerd. I hit 4. On the
you hit
story.
4 on it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I hit 5 on the performance, just because I thought the dude did a great job there.
He did. It was a good reading of the book. It was a pleasant listen, because the first time I listened to it, it was just I listened to it normal, and it was a good listen. It was a good listen. The problems with the Audible side of listening to this are not that guy's fault. It's like when we reviewed Jason Mott's Hell of a Book. Go check it out. Part of the problem why some of that stuff fell flat was because of the way the guy read it.
Right.
There were things in there that might have been more impactful had it been performed
better inflections. If you're going to tell a joke, maybe change your tone that you've been using for the whole book.
Yeah.
Right. So.
My mind. Oh my God! I just realized I'm a black man. No, but I just really like. I just kind of like Chuck Palahniuk too. He's a guy I could probably listen to talk, just interviews. I could listen to him for hours.
Mm-hmm.
He's just a fascinating dude. He's got a weird writing process. One of the things that he said in terms of about the because he's like a Gen X gay guy. They're like, well, you're writing about somebody like Gates Foster. How do you write a guy like that? He's like, I'm at the point in my life where I'm mourning the kids I never had. He's like, I wish I had a legacy. And he's like,
Damn.
and I think about that, and I think about what it would mean to have it and then lose it, and the madness that would engender in a person. So he's like, that's why I like him, because he's very self-aware and he's very honest. He doesn't
Right.
pull punches. Like, that's like a, no matter how you feel about the concept of like abortion or whatever, women measure progress with whether or not they can kill something is both a hilarious line
Mm-hmm.
and also not that far off the mark. Not to be too political or anything, but like, I think like that is like, if you measure progress by like this kind of bodily autonomy, like, and then you look at reality of what is actually occurring, because abortion's been made such like a political issue, like that's a pretty astute observation. I would never say something like that. Obviously, only Chuck Palahniuk would. I would never say something like that. But
You're just pointing it out.
yeah, I'm just pointing it out. Listen, guys. I'm just talking.
Mm-hmm.
Also, another thing I learned about Chuck Palahniuk, I just want to say before we get off, he's a big fan of Kolchak the Night Stalker.
Oh,
Just want to say,
one of
Kolchak
your
the Night
all-time
Stalker,
favorites.
one of my all-time favorite things ever.
You would make me, when we were kids, watch hours of that shit. You gotta check this out.
Loved it.
You gotta check this out.
You loved it, dude. You loved it.
I love being your friend.
You're missing out, buddy. You got to open your eyes, okay? You got to see what's out there. Enjoy yourself. Have a good time.
Yeah. I gotta go rewatch it.
Oh, I got the Blu-rays. Next time we get together, I'll bring them. We can watch it again. I can make you watch it again for hours.
Yeah. Well, real quick, the greatest thing about Legacy and stuff, this like what you will do with your number 2 coming on, but with my number 3, I think about a couple more years, I get to revisit going through all the Lord of the Rings.
I know, you son of a bitch.
I know. I get to go through that all over again, and every time it's fucking awesome.
Do you ever think about like showing Foster Fight Club, or not Foster? Sorry, Troy. Troy.
No, that's your kid.
I think about.
You see, we finish each other's sentences. We can tease each other's kids. And
yeah.
It's just
because I think about Foster. I'm like, what's the right age to show him Fight Club?
I would say 13. Next year, I'm going to go over that. I think
so.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly,
yeah.
I think that it is way more about like the nature of of male companionship and camaraderie, and you're going to learn different things at 13 that you're going to learn when you're 35.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's a good time to watch that movie for some weird reason. Maybe because we watched it when we were that age, so we just like insist.
Right.
So, that's fine.
No, it articulates it like we said, like go check out the Fight Club like movie book review, but like it articulates something that as a your teenage angst that you can't articulate because you're a stupid teenager, right?
Yeah.
And then once you get that out of your system, you get that, and then as you grow up with it, then you can reflect and go back to it, and it just becomes like a richer experience. So hopefully
he doesn't take it as literally as we did.
Yeah, no, he's a square just like his mom. So like a rule follower.
I'm sure we talked about it in that podcast, but we definitely were like, oh, let's start our own fight. Yeah, we'll start Fight Clubs. It's great.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
My favorite scene is, man, when he's talking about how he wants to beat up historical figures, man.
Yeah.
Fucking great scene, man.
Abe Lincoln, baby. So, but yeah, man, I don't have anything other to say other than like I really enjoyed like talking to you about it. I enjoyed reading it, and I've been waiting all week to talk to you about this one, man. I'm glad.
I'm glad we finally were able to do it. Like, and I do. I think it's even talking through this past like hour. I've actually come to like it more. I think it's Palahniuk really was seeding this with things that you don't even realize when you're reading it even twice or listening to it twice. And then once you start talking about it, you're like, oh my God, like there's all these connections.
That was there. Oh God.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
It is cool.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, there's a bunch of links in the description. We got Instagram, we got TikToks, we got Reddits. If you want to donate, if you really like this, you want to donate and help us get better equipment at some point, there's a place you can do that also in the description. But really, what I would love you to do, give it a like, give it a share if you found it insightful or fun or whatever. Help us out. Help spread the Zoobox love, okay? Mm-hmm. Zoobox trying to change the world, trying to save lives here, okay?
We are. We are. We're infiltrating different subcultures of the internet. We're bringing them on, and we're converting people one person at a time, one
We're
soul
basic-
at a time.
We're basically slowly turning ourselves into Gates Foster. So come back in 17 years and see how we're doing.
Yeah, I was going more for like a Jim Jones vibe, like just kind of like a cult going. But I mean, Gates Foster, it's too singular.
Oh,
We're trying to
yeah,
build
no.
a network. We're trying to build, like everything else on the internet, a community. Okay?
A
So,
community
all right,
of like-minded individuals.
yeah,
But,
that's okay. I'll edit this out. Don't worry about
Yeah,
it.
don't worry about it. Big Paul's got the edit on this one.
Ooh, baby.
But yeah, like just like it, share it around. That's actually the most helpful thing you can do really at this juncture, and we do appreciate it. We appreciate your time. Don't think we didn't, because we did, and we are, and we will. All right, everybody, you guys have the best one ever. Thanks, Big Paul.
I fucked her! Oh God, oh God, oh God, he had a gun in my mouth! The fucking gun was in my throat! Fuck!